Yeah, welcome for day two of our event. Second year that we have it. First year we do it in 2 days. So yesterday we had a great day. Was first diving into the technical side of AI and talking about what it is and what it is not. Then we had a session with Nick Shepton-Jones about learning and how we think and how we learn, and also how that relates to AI. And he has some interesting points of view there. We had a discussion on the impact of AI on the learning tools together with Nelson from How Now. And finally, we looked into the prompting with Kartik. And today we have two more sessions with presenters that will actually share their knowledge with them, and then we'll do a wrap up. So first we have Steffen, where we'll look into text to video, so AI generated video. And then the second session will be with Hailey, who will talk about ethics and AI. And then wrap it up with Wildermuth. We will look at basically all the sessions, what the key points are, our key takeaways, and then also we'll give sort of a heads up what we think is next. So that is what we have today. So today is like a bit, something like 2 hours in 3 sessions. So we'll start with Steffen. So Steffen is the CTO of Synthesia, and Synthesia is one of the tools that is already out there for quite a while. So they were early in the whole AI exposure thing, I would say. And it's an amazing tool. So you just type in the text, and then you choose your avatar, and the avatar speaks your text, and you can even have it speak your text in many different languages. So it's a very interesting technology, but it also raises a couple of questions. So first, Steffen will walk us through that, and then we'll talk a bit about the up and the downsides that potentially are attached to that technology. So Steffen, take it away.
Yeah, thank you so much, Kasper, and thank you so much, Molly, for inviting me. I'm happy to share a little bit more about Synthesia and the wonderful world of AI-generated content. I'll try to do this as brief as possible, but I want to give you a little bit of an overview of where these technologies are coming from, but also where they are today and where they're potentially also moving into in the future. So I'm still the technical genius behind technology. These technologies stems in spirit from Stanford University, where Professor Matthias Niesner and Lourdes Agapito for the first time showcased how you can kind of change and update video after the fact. And when Victor and myself saw this, it was just an incredible glimpse into the future of content creation. And we all united on this mission of making video easy for everyone, right? And here it was less about making a smaller, more affordable camera, or making a slightly more intuitive video editing experience. It was really thinking video from first principles and try to let computers synthesize and generate the pixels, as opposed to kind of capture that much more efficiently with traditional kind of production processes. So we set out on this mission in 2017, before ChatGPT, before any kind of these kind of adventures that's kind of happened and then pioneered this space since. Why is this interesting? Why does this matter at all, especially in a kind of e-learning context, right? I think it's probably no surprise to many of your audiences that is just requesting more and more kind of engaging forms of media, right? And if we think about our private lives, it's very dominated by rich media. So everything from consuming Netflix and TikTok and YouTube, which is kind of very video-first interfaces that we do in our private lives. But when we come into work, right, it's often PDFs, PowerPoints, emails, Word documents. It's very kind of piles of text that is facing us. And it's not because companies don't know that, and you of all people don't know that. It's simply just because the traditional production process and going from just the simplest form of idea is still a very multidisciplinary process that requires a lot of different steps, right? And then when you want to change one thing, right, it's all over again. So the way this type to the standards and to the kind of the needs of a modern work professionals, they want to listen and kind of watch their content as opposed to read, right? So what Synthesia has been working hard at for the last 7 years is to kind of compress the entire production process into this video editor that looks and feels very much like PowerPoint. The big difference is obviously the script box, the actors to create these presenter-led videos in the browser. And here what we're doing is that when you press generate in the top right corner here, you actually are synthesizing the lip movements, the facial expressions, the audio track of the actor to create these e-learning style content pieces at a snap of a finger. And that is really kind of the breakthrough that Synthesis has been pioneering for the last few years. The way kind of our customers are typically using the technology is less about, you know, replacing all the amazing kind of brain content and a lot of the high production value with senior executives or with CEO messaging and these type of things. It's really about replacing or converting a lot of the text-based information that has never been having the budget or the time to actually become a video, right? So it is really kind of lifting all this text that nobody reads into much more kind of engaging forms of media. And I think the best example of this is probably McDonald's, right? When you are a 18-year-old new McDonald's employee, do you want to receive a 30-second video on how to empty the deep fryer or a 3-page PDF? That's typically a no-brainer for the individual, right? Because it's way more engaging. You actually understand what's happening. It's also a no-brainer for McDonald's, right? Because the learning retention, the ramp times, the efficiency is just going up dramatically. And that's very much the common denominator across many of the logos and companies that we're already working with, is to really kind of transition a lot of this kind of, you know, text-based training and learning content into much more engaging video formats in 150 languages that we now support. I think I'll just quickly pause here and show how some of our customers are using the technology. If you have that, Molly.
Microsoft Teams is built for hybrid collaboration.
You'll find everything you need to know about Oracle Digital Assistant.
The first step in your Go Cardless journey is choosing how you would like to use it.
For web, you can also set your horizontal and vertical padding to
Digital Journey Enablement Session on April 6th.
Hello, I'm Jared's avatar, your digital innovation assistant.
On your first day at Netflix, you'll meet your manager and
Mein Name ist Sandy Bacchus. Seit 2020 bin ich selbstständige Partnerin der
Yeah, so it's a pretty versatile tool that can be used for so many different things. And the power of it is that it's really as easy as it looks. It is really kind of as easy to produce as it is to do a PowerPoint. I'll just quickly flip through a few more case studies, and then we can jump into the Q&A. But the way our kind of customers are thinking about it is kind of improving, you know, the viewer experience over kind of text, but also thinking about it in a cost production perspective, right? So how is these kind of methods stacking up against kind of physical production as kind of way to kind of reduce cost, right? And we have as mentioned, a lot of different kind of, you know, companies, right, that is using it for many different things. And here's just Xerox that is using it to train their sales force. They have a very remote sales force that has a hard time to get up to speed with some of the latest features, the latest kind of product stuff. How do you actually enable a very distributed workforce to know the latest kind of product knowledge and product landscape? So that's kind of a pretty good use case where we just see video working really well in these kind of more asynchronous type of use cases where you don't have everybody in a meeting room today. And we're also working with DuPont that obviously has, you know, many different geographies around the world and many different locations with a very kind of complex kind of product suite. So here it's also really kind of leveraging video to just enable and create much more engaged employees. Using the powers of the languages, but also the power of these videos being tailored to different audiences around the world, right? And some of the things that we see many of our customers are leveraging is that once video kind of breaks the chains of being a normal video and is actually as easy to produce as a PowerPoint, you also start to change the way you use video, right? So you probably want to communicate slightly differently to your new employees versus existing employees, and you probably want to speak very differently to a developer versus, you know, a HR employee, right? So it's also kind of really changing video from this kind of one size fits all and become much more tailored way of kind of communicating to different audiences and much better and much higher way to resonate with your audience. Also using Zoom to kind of using more interactive terms of sales training. So having different personas that is kind of representing different kind of ICPs and personalities. How do you train a workforce to communicate and understand some of the customers that they're selling into in a much more engaging way. Before I round off here, I'll just talk a little bit about where we think these technologies are going in the future. So what you see on the platform today is very much these kind of 2D avatars that's kind of talking to you. It can look and feel very much like a PowerPoint with an avatar on top. But where we're moving in the short, hopefully next year, is to go more into 3D. So creating much more full body, fully expressive avatars that can kind of do much more advanced and sophisticated storytelling. And that is kind of the path that we are on as a company to really kind of pioneer the change and the shift from recorded to actually generated content and being kind of the leading digital human company to create these presenter-led content pieces in the browser. So with that was a quick intro to Synthesia. I'm happy to provide anybody with a free trial. You can feel free to reach out to me here on the email or on LinkedIn or in the chat. I'll also send my contact information. But thanks a lot for the opportunity to speak to you today.
Thanks for the presentation, Steffen. And already a couple of questions are popping up in the chat. Feel free to add more. We'll go over them in a minute. But first, I want to ask some questions to you, because it's great technology, and it is indeed that easy. You put in the text, press the button, and you get the video. But it also raises some questions on which information, which content is real, which is not real, which is created by AI. So how do you look at that? Do you think that as a problem, as a threat?
Yeah, I think it's kind of, with all these kind of new technologies, right? I think it's a lot about transparency and not trying to kind of fool the audience. So how we see many of our customers and the best practices around this is to kind of have high transparency upfront. So being very upfront that, hey, I'm an AI-generated presenter. I'm going to talk you through this course today. I'm not a real human. It's a little bit when you interact with maybe a chatbot on a website and you think it's a human, but it turns out to be a computer. You also get very frustrated pretty quickly. So here we really advise people to be very transparent with how they kind of use the technology and not try to kind of fool anybody, to level set those expectations. And that is typically received very, very well by the audience.
Yeah, and I think the usage of Synthesia is, of course, a bit different because it's a fixed set of avatars that you can use. So it's not that you can suddenly have Donald Trump think that he didn't. But there is, of course, also technology which is sort of in line with what you do that makes that possible. So how do you look at that? Do you consider that dangerous? Or is that?
Yeah, so there's obviously how Synthesia's technology is not being used for bad. So we have a pretty kind of strong guidelines, and we knew when we started the company that these technologies are pretty controversial. So we've kind of built an ethical framework when we started the company around the 3 C's, which is everything about explicit consent. So everybody who's becoming an avatar on the platform has to explicitly say they want to become an avatar. And we have a KYC style type of funnel to become an avatar. So everybody can kind of create it, but they have to go through this kind of protocol to make sure that they understand what they're saying yes to. The next component is around control. So if you actually change your mind, you should always be in control of your own likeness and your own avatar. So you'll still have a lot of control around your avatar in that sense, and you can always track that. And the last piece is around collaboration, right? We know these technologies is here for good, and it's kind of the genie's out of the bottle to an extent. So it's also a lot about how do we collaborate with other partners to roll these out in a safe and secure manner. So we engage a lot in the community, both with regulators, with other tech companies, the big tech giants, of how do we roll these technologies out in a safe and secure manner, while also kind of leveraging and harnessing some of the positive effects that we see.
Okay, but the way you speak about it is more that you sort of urge people to sort of be transparent, but it's not that you have like a watermark, so you can actually see that it's an AI generated video and it's not a real person talking to you.
Yeah, we do actually do that in more on the metadata. So we work with the Adobe content or authenticity kind of protocol, which is kind of a broad, kind of more internet-wide scale type of way of doing it. There's some companies that want to kind of be very upfront, but we let our customers make that decision. But on the actual metadata, we are actually encoding that it has a signal. This has been, been AI generated, yes or no. But I think actually the signal, if something has been through an AI system, yes or no, I think it's going to be a very weak signal in a few years, similar to photos, right? If you look at every photo on the internet, they have been through some photo filter or through Photoshop or through something. So if this picture has been altered or been changed, that will give you a very kind of false positive signal to many of the images on the internet. So the way we're thinking about this is more about media provenance. So is this the original meaning with the content, even if you're using visual effects or AI techniques to kind of alter that story or alter the kind of the images, but is this the actual original purpose with the piece of content? And when that provenance is changed or broken, that's kind of really where things are kind of being signaled. So that's more the kind of the framework and the lens that we are thinking about the safety around these technologies.
Okay. And a bit more practical is also connect to a couple of questions already popping up. It's around the avatars that you use. So you have a fixed set of avatars and it's sort of, and you publish it. So I'm not able to create an avatar myself, correct?
No, you can create an avatar of yourself, and that is actually a very popular feature. So it is a kind of 30-minute protocol to kind of create a custom avatar of yourself. It doesn't require any special hardware, any special equipment, but we're not touching a lot of the image quality, right? So if you record on your webcam at home, it will also be a less kind of good quality avatar that you get out in the other end. So we suggest that the customers are kind of investing a little bit in a nice camera and a nice green screen and a nice kind of backdrop to make sure that they actually get a good avatar out in the other end. But you can make your own avatar, and it's a very popular feature.
Okay, so I just shoot a video with certain requirements and then upload it, and then you create an avatar out of it, and then basically I can use myself to speak things through text.
Exactly.
Yeah.
In 150 languages.
Yeah, because that's one thing that next to having the feature that text to video, it's also text to many languages, of course. And is that being used a lot? We have a feature in User Generator ourselves where people can translate content on the fly into many languages, and with the users for that. Is that also a big feature in your tool in Synthesia?
Yeah, totally. I think it's just getting more default that people are expecting their content in their local language, especially as these techniques are allowing it. There's not really any excuses anymore to kind of, having this kind of one size fits all with, either English or other kind of, main languages that people want to consume, right? So with these techniques, making it much easier to kind of consume and kind of, create the content, I think it's just becoming much more table stakes for companies to communicate with employees in their own language, especially as companies operate globally, right, and have many different employees around the world. I think you just see that the engagement of kind of the content in local languages is much higher than if you just have kind of English and also one size fits all, right? And I think one thing is the translation, which is the easy, or it's the most kind of obvious way of localizing, but you probably also want to speak in a slightly different tone, catering for other kind of cultural differences. If you're speaking to people in Korea versus in France versus in Germany versus in Latin America, right? You probably also want to alter slightly the way you communicate, apart from just the languages kind of change the one-to-one, right?
A real localization there. And just one question, if I look at the translation feature we have, so that's also automatically translated. And it is pretty good, but it's far from perfect. So we always advise people that they sort of do a double check and have somebody who is like fluent in that language to check it. How does that work with Synthesia?
Yeah, I think it's the same. I think these machine translation systems are getting really, really good. They're still not perfect, but I think it also depends a little bit on what is the content and what is the threshold of quality. Where if you work in very highly regulated industries where it has to be just word perfect and you can't have any wrong kind of interpretations, that's obviously a different bar than if it's more kind of, low stakes content that just needs to be available in different languages, right? So I think it's up to the individual company, the individual use case to judge where that line is going. But we are building workflow where you can kind of come in, you can invite your local colleague to kind of come in and verify the translations. Okay, so and that's obviously also something that is very popular, yeah.
I already see a couple of questions popping up around cartoons avatar. Is that something which is available in Synthesia, or is it always like video based?
Yeah, so we've kind of been contemplating this for a long time, right? But we have to also, as a startup, think about what is our claim to fame, and thinking that we can do everything as perfect as at once is probably a little bit too unrealistic. So we've kind of decided to just focus on 100% photorealistic humans, while other companies are kind of probably more going into the animation side of things. But we are seeing a big shift from a lot of the cartoon-based kind of learnings into more digital or much more realistic humans with Synthesia, as especially for more soft topics and more serious topics, right? Where it can also be a little bit funny to see a cartoon going through some quite serious topics. So there's probably a need for cartoon for some type of content, but we are seeing a stronger and stronger preference for actual real humans, as we as humans have been since hundreds of thousands of years, have been used and very hardwired to understand and communicate with other people, right? And that's very much how we have kind of perceived and understood information as a species. Yeah.
Okay, so there are other tools out there that have cartoon-like avatars, but it's probably not something that we will see in Synthesia. Okay, clear. So, Molly, so you have been monitoring the chat. So any specific questions that pop up that you want to address? We have 5 more minutes.
Can you hear me? Yeah, perfect.
Yeah,
yeah, there have been a lot of questions specific to Synthesia. One question about, when people will be able to, import the script directly from PowerPoint notes section into Synthesia without having to copy or paste. So I guess the integration with PowerPoint, whether that's possible.
Yeah, so we have a pretty low-level integration with PowerPoint. We're working on better ways, but Microsoft, unfortunately, is not too generous with how the API works. So it's more a kind of restriction on the PowerPoint API. We are working on alternative ways to make that integration a bit more smooth, where you can don't have to kind of copy and paste and do it too much, as kind of how it works today.
Perfect. And this one is about kind of the integration with GPT. John asks, can this be integrated with GPT for dynamic exchanges with an avatar, for example, to practice a feedback conversation?
Yeah, so we are actually we're launching 2 avatars on screen, hopefully in the next few weeks. So that's gonna be where you can kind of change the editor from this one single kind of avatar talking to you to become much more kind of conversational. And we also have a kind of a ChatGPT kind of integration into the platform, so you can actually generate the content and create these kind of more scenario-based or conversational types of videos. So we'll also launch a few templates that people can use once they are kind of generating content in more of these styles, but that will come out in a few weeks.
I also see a question on integration with Easy Generator. So I know that we are partners, so there's a partnership agreement in place between Easy Generator and Synthesia, and I know that we did make certain that everything that you can create inside Synthesia is like working pitch perfect into Easy Generator. There's no integration yet. I know that there are some considerations there, so it would be awesome, because for us it's always that we only want to add features if they're really simple. So the idea would, of course, be that you just have like a text feature in Easy Generator, press a button, and on the background, Synthesia will actually provide you the interface and the video. So it's something that we are considering, but that hasn't been on the roadmap yet, as far as I know. Is that also your understanding, Steffen?
Yeah, I think we're definitely gonna be more kind of proactive around the more native integrations. So easing the workflow with LMS system, with authoring tools like Easy Generator. So that's definitely something that we'll kind of evaluate and kind of consider more next year for sure.
Yeah. Okay.
Great.
So who knows what will happen next year? Okay. Molly, over to you for the other questions.
Yeah, maybe one more quick question. This one, Robert was asking about what powers the translation in Synthesia.
So we work with a kind of number of the state-of-the-art machine translation companies that's out there. So we have some companies that are more experts in, Asian and APAC countries, and then others that's more good in European languages. So we have a mix of the different users and the different kind of providers there.
Perfect. Well, I think that's a good one to end on too. And yeah, I see a lot of other questions in the chat as well around Synthesia. So if you have any more questions, Steffen put his email address in the chat. Maybe, Steffen, you can do it one more time just so that it's fresh. So if you have any specific questions, you can definitely reach out to him as well. But yeah, I think that's everything. Kasper, anything else on your end?
No, I want to thank Steven for his participation. And I think this is a great example of AI and what it can do. And I also think it's a great example of how AI is like a supportive technology, because it makes it very easy to create a video, and it really is an option to create like more interactivity and engagement in learning in a very easy way. So I think it's a great example of the uses of AI. So thanks, Steffen, for showing us.
Yeah. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for having me. Thanks so much, Kasper.
Take care.
Bye.
All right, then I will get Hailey on the stage for our next session. Just give her a moment to join.
Yeah, and I also thought that I see in the chat there are a lot of specific questions, so maybe we can indeed gather them and see if we can get answers and share that. And we can probably work with Synthesia on that. I see Mary Elise asking that, so I think that's a good idea. So we'll see if we can make that work.
Definitely. And here is Hailey. Hello. I think you are muted. There we go. Oh.
You're still muted. You clicked twice, probably. Now you're there. No, again.
I did double click.
Okay, welcome, Hailey. So I will do a short introduction. So yeah, the next session that we will do with Hailey is about ethics. And it's, of course, a big question. It has already been touched upon a couple of times in other sessions. And it is one of the main concerns around the use of AI, especially with generative AI. So if you create content, so you touch upon a couple of things. So we found Hailey willing to talk about that, and it would be probably one of the many topics you can talk about on AI, because I think you're really all round. So as far as I know, you have like a master degree in AI at Stanford, but I think that you could have been talking about prompting, about the technology, about AI learning, but we chose this time to have you talk about AI and ethics. So I'm really looking forward to this discussion, because I think it's a big topic. So Hailey, can you maybe first introduce yourself, and then I think you want to share some things with us first.
Yes, hi everyone, I'm Hailey Yoon. I'm a software developer based in Dubai. So I am a CTO in residence at Gleek, so I'm in charge of developing AI and a lot of other software development in terms of learning and development space.
Just give me a sec, because yeah. So Hailey, can you share your screen and do your presentation for us?
I think I need to rejoin if I want to do that. Molly, anyway, you can share the screen, or should I rejoin after this?
You're muted, Molly.
There should be in the bottom a place that you can start sharing your screen. And that bottom.
Can you see my screen?
No.
Not yet.
Okay, very good.
Yes.
No.
It's loading. Yes, perfect.
Ah, good. Yes, so I just wanted to quickly walk you through what I want to go through during today's session. So I want to make sure that everybody here walks away with awareness and this long-term impact, that what are the things that we need to look out for in the world of AI, especially if those of you who are in learning and development space and edutech space. It's very critical that you are aware of certain bias, or what are the things that we need to intentionally look for when integrating AI into your learning strategy. So I want to spend some time, the first 10 minutes, diving into AI in L&D and definitions of what are the important keywords and definitions of them. And next one, I want to talk about case studies. So I prepared 3 example case studies, one with ChatGPT that everybody's aware of, and one with ChatSonic, and one with Google Bard. So we're going to go through and identify bias together. And lastly, a Q&A session, talking about questions that you guys have. So the first thing that I want to talk about is human bias versus AI bias. So whenever there is a learning and development, we often think about what are the bias that we have. So human biases are often rooted in social, cultural, and personal perspective. So heavily depending on your background, your upbringing, your cultural background, or where you reside right now. And AI biases typically stem from the data they are trained on, the design of algorithms and objectives set by their human creators. So it's not AI itself is it biased. It's more like the human creator who trained the model with specific data set. The mistake can be amplified after AI getting involved. So that's AI bias. So both types of biases have significant implications for data privacy, fairness, and accessibility. So the first part that I want to talk about is data privacy. So data privacy in the context of AI and L&D refers to the protection of personal and sensitive information. So this can be, GDPR is commonly known one. There's a legal compliances that we need to make sure in a lot of the Middle Eastern countries, the sensitive information cannot leave the country. For example, Saudi Arabia, passports, any national ID information has to reside locally. And we want to make sure this data misuse doesn't happen. So that's one area that we need to focus on. And the next one is fairness. So fairness in AI and L&D refers to impartial and equitable treatment of all learners by AI systems. So there are 4 areas that we need to intentionally think about. So bias prevention, equal opportunities, ethical responsibility, and long-term impact. So we want to make sure this AI is fair in terms of availabilities, and also analysis of the information when using AI.
Can I ask a question on that, Hailey?
Yes, of course.
That is not only depending, of course, on AI. It's equal opportunities and things like that. Well, the world is not completely fair, and things are not distributed even. So it's great that you want to do that, that you want to take that into account in AI. But is there something that AI can actually do to sort of bridge those gaps that we have and be more, that it becomes more equal? So not only guarding that it's equal, but making sort of an active role. Can we do something with AI there? Do you understand my question?
I think I kind of get it. So AI could improve. So AI could actually improve fairness because AI doesn't get emotional. Because sometimes when human is making a decision or a human needs to make assessment on somebody's performance, often that your personal interaction with the other individual can create something that's more in favor or less in favor. So I think AI could definitely help in that area. Did I answer your question?
Yes, yeah, indeed, sort of. Yeah, but I'm also thinking that I assume because AI will make a lot of knowledge available. So probably somebody who is better educated, already has a lot of knowledge, will have less advantage of AI, and someone with less education can benefit more from AI because now that knowledge is suddenly also available. So I was thinking also along those lines that it can actually equalize things and help people educate themselves or get access to knowledge.
Absolutely. I think in that context, I think it's more about, so people who already have knowledge, background and knowledge, it'll be more of validation, because you always want to double check if what you're thinking and what you believe in is correct, or the fact you want to fact check the information. And if the person does not have previous knowledge in it, it'll be definitely very helpful to get more information using AI.
Correct. Okay. Thank you.
And the last part, not last, is accessibility. So accessibility is in this learning and development context, we are referring to usability for all learners, including those with disabilities or learning differences. So we want to make sure that we do inclusive learning, legal and ethical obligations are met, diverse learning needs, and technology as an enabler. So we don't want this technology to become a barrier for those, for certain learners. So I prepared 3 case studies. So I would actually love to see on chat that if any of you guys use AI tools on your daily operations, and what are the tools that you prefer. I personally use ChatGPT a lot, and I started using Chessonic also because Chessonic gives a lot of good resource references. And when I was using this, I started to notice some inaccurate information or something that is biased, and I want to walk you through those examples today. So we talked about 3 different areas. So the first part that we talked about fairness, and then bias, then last accessibility. So I prepared 1 example each. So the first one will be done with ChatGPT, so assessing fairness. So I asked ChatGPT a question. So the question was, do you alter your leadership training recommendations based on the age or years of experience of the manager? And could you give me an example of how recommendations differ for a younger manager versus a more seasoned one? And here, ChatGPT gave me 6 key recommendations for 6 for young managers and 6 for more senior managers. And the young managers, it recommended fundamentals of leadership, mentoring and coaching, adapting to corporate culture, technology and innovation, communication skills, and emotional intelligence and self-awareness. So one thing that I noticed right away is that here, young managers, so here there is like a little bit of bias in assessing the fairness that younger managers need more emotional intelligence, because it's not necessarily person's years of experience that you develop emotional intelligence. So that's one thing that came to my mind right away. And the second part is for more senior managers, it recommended advanced leadership concepts, mentoring others, navigating organizational change, updating skills, executive presence and influence, and succession planning. And here, one thing that I found very interesting is missing technology and innovation. Because a lot of senior managers or senior roles of the company are often innovators, creators, and they're being more senior or more seasoned managers doesn't necessarily mean you're not tech savvy, yet this information did not include any of the technology part. So I found that very interesting. Lastly, combining all of this. Yes.
So the fact that it makes a distinction, that is not the case. It's more the assumptions that it has connected to the different roles that sort of bother you. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay.
So I have found it very interesting how ChatGPT has this set of recommendations that's tailored for younger managers and seasoned managers. And I do see majority of them being helpful. And I can see that it's good intention, and ChatGPT tried its best to build the training that's best for them. But one thing that I would do differently as a human is I think I would give everybody, no matter which level, all managers, technology and innovations and mentoring and coaching options instead of mentoring others and coaching missing from seasoned managers. Sorry, not missing, younger managers, because younger managers could also mentor the younger, like junior developers or more junior analysts in the company. And now the next part is testing for bias. The question that I asked was, for a leadership workshop, would you recommend different skill development areas for male and female managers? If yes, what are these areas? So this is answer generated by Google Bard, and I know this is a sensitive sensitive issue, gender bias, and something that I found interesting is I actually asked these questions to all ChatGPT, ChatSonic, and Google Bard, and the only AI that I found that gave two different responses, two different responses, for one for male and one for female, was Google Bard, and that's why I selected this example. So here it actually begins very nicely. While many leadership skills are universal and applicable to both male and female managers, there are also some specific areas of skill development that may be more relevant. And Bard lists, for male managers, they might benefit more from emotional intelligence and self-awareness, empathy and active listening, communication style adaptability, collaborative leadership and consensus building, coaching and mentoring. So these are listed for male managers. Interestingly, female managers, it listed assertiveness and self-advocacy, networking building alliances, sponsorship, mentorship, visibility, self-promotion, work-life balance, and resilience. So I found this very interesting that male managers, the Google Bard is suggesting male managers to work on more soft skill side. You need to be empathetic, you need to collaborate, you need to communicate well, while female managers you need to step up your game. You need to be more assertive. You need to demonstrate more leadership, and also work-life balance and resilience. So I thought this was extremely interesting. I would love to hear your thoughts here, Kasper.
Yeah, so indeed, so the questions comes to mind, and I also see some remarks in the chat around that. So one of the suggestions in the chat is to prevent this from happening, you should have like gender neutral content uploaded in your AI to prevent this from happening. But then the question, is that the case? Because you indicated that the 3 tools gave you 3 different answers, and probably all 3 of them are trained on generic web content. So is it the content that makes it biased, in this case for gender, or is it also the AI that is maybe biased, maybe it's programmed wrong or learning wrong? I don't know. So do we know that?
I think it's a little bit of both, because the data it trained on is made by a human. So I think that's one cause, one factor that's causing this. And I think I see it in the comment asking, is the issue with the AI having bias or the prompt suggesting? And I definitely think it's prompt engineering too. So when we as a user using AI for different learning development context, maybe we could do more prompt engineering that produce least no bias, or at least mitigate the bias, so that when we are developing some training modules or company milestones or company learning milestones, we can be less biased. So.
Because it touches on a topic that we discussed yesterday briefly, and that is that all these tools get their information from generic sources, but those sources are biased by definition, because the access to internet was earlier in the West, so a relatively larger part of the internet content is created by people from the West, Europe and the United States, and maybe even I don't know, even there's a difference in that maybe white male have more impact or more input there, and other countries who got access later probably have less content there. So it's just also a way, and it's also a number game in fact. So that is a really strange phenomenon, is it?
And one of the reasons that I am showing different AI tools is so that you get a little bit of idea of how each AI behaves, because they are trained on slightly different models. And it's so when you ask very general questions, it doesn't show that much. But when you start asking more deeper questions or deeper more about philosophy or are like more sensitive areas, that's when you will see the differences of each AI. So I highly encourage everybody here to test run it yourself. It's very interesting. The last case studies that I have is evaluating accessibility. So how would you adapt your training module recommendations for a manager with a physical disability? And can you give a specific example? So this is an example that I got from Chesonic. And here, I don't have it included in the screenshot, but one thing that I really like about Chesonic is it actually gives you a source where exactly they got the information from. So here, when you see the number 2, that actually goes into that specific source. So this is not AI just coming up on its, I would say it's actually more evidence-based result.
But
so here,
it get more like a search engine instead of AI, because it doesn't give you an answer, it gives you a quote.
It's paraphrased, but it's showing where exactly they got this evidence from. So like, how did they come to this conclusion? So right. I would say if anybody ever needs some more fact check and you want to see why that AI is responding that way, Chesonic might be your best tool. And here it talks about how a manager with physical disability, it's crucial to provide appropriate accommodation and support. And for example, if there is a manager with low vision, the training materials can be made accessible by using large print text or audio tape recordings. And additionally, providing equipment with large monitors and can enhance their ability to perform tasks more effectively. And it's also important to communicate effectively with individuals who are blind and ask for permission before interacting with their guide dog, or overall by customizing accommodations based on the specific needs of the manager with a physical disability. So here, something that I thought about is learning and development. We often forget that there are larger audience than there is a very large group of people with different needs. So in this particular example, we're talking about physical disability, but it could be neurological disorder or different types of needs. And I think it's very important that you, when you select a learning tool for the company learning and development strategy, that you give that options for everybody. So everybody has access to learning materials, learning tools, and they can actually participate in learning.
Can I ask a question on that? Because that sort of opens up a really interesting discussion, because on one hand, you want the content to be not biased and fair. On the other hand, you want it to be as specific as possible, tailored for someone's needs. But with that, you open up a sort of a risk that you enter into bias, because the moment that you make it specific, you have probably some assumptions on how to do that. So isn't that sort of a contradiction?
I see your point. It is a little tricky because we want to be not biased and be very inclusive at the same time.
Correct. Isn't that? Yeah, I'm always, maybe you have to choose one over the other.
I think being inclusive will hopefully also get rid of the bias, because it'll cover more variety of spectrum that you can offer for learning and development. And I think it's very interesting how we as a human use the tool when developing learning strategies for company or your team members or for yourself for career navigation. The whole reason that I wanted to bring this awareness to everybody is so that now when you interact with AI, you know what are the things that might be wrong or might be misleading, and now you will intentionally filter the information that you receive from AI.
Correct. Yeah. So and if you look at, oh, sorry, go ahead with your closing thoughts, because it was probably too soon.
So closing thoughts. So we explored practical aspects of AI tools, emphasizing the need for unbiased, inclusive technology, concluded with a reminder of the importance of ethical considerations in AI-driven learning. Most importantly, being informed and aware of these issues is the first step. And now we know that, now we know what to watch out for in the future.
Do you also have specific recommendations? So, for example, I thought I've heard in your story that ChatSonic might be a bit less biased than the other two. Like, is that a better tool, or it's also about the prompting, of course? So do you have certain advice on what we should do and what we shouldn't do?
So for me personally, when I do learning and development strategies, when I'm doing more of a research side, I always go for ChatSonic because I can trace back to the source and then decide if I want to include it or not. But more casual or like friend-like bouncing off ideas, I go for ChatGPT. But ChatGPT, I intentionally make sure the data prompting is not. I always include the command to say highlighting that do not do this or do not do that, so that I don't get certain bias. So, for example, I would say for Asian students, please use same standard as Western universities, or like I intentionally add one more sentence so that the bias is not there.
Okay, it's interesting because that's not different. How if I have a question, so probably with one question I would go to one person, and with another question I prefer to go to another person. So you just do sort of the same with your AI tools. You have a specific tool for each kind of question. Yeah, that's interesting. Okay, I think we have a few more minutes for questions. So, Molly, have you been monitoring the chat and
yeah,
topic there?
Yeah, we do have a few questions here. One question from Cristina: if we are coming up with organization-specific AIs, might we be able to control these types of biases, or will the biases be hidden in the organization existing content be amplified?
Yes. So a lot of organizations have their own closed AI, which ensures the privacy and just in case confidentiality, so that your information or possibly biased information does not leave your organization, and you can mitigate within your system. So yeah.
Okay.
Something that we do is we have Mentor GPT. So this is I'm sure everybody here is familiar with this new GPT model training that you can build your own GPT now, and something that you should definitely try. So you can do it with OpenAI, or there are a lot of other tools on open source on GitHub. I do prefer OpenAI. Any open source information, so that I get variety of data sets, and that's not just our organizations for comparison wise. But I do see why some organizations prefer to stay private, especially when the data is sensitive. So a lot of like law firms, consulting firms do prefer the closed AI.
And that means that you run an AI engine on your own server, so the data doesn't leave your own, doesn't go beyond your firewall. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay.
So it stays within your intranet.
Nice. And then another question, I guess this one goes back to like we talked about it a bit. Like you mentioned that the prompts, someone asked, is the issue with the AI having bias, or with the prompts suggesting distinctions between young, older, and male, female? Yeah, I guess maybe if you can unpack that, because there were still a few questions about it. So maybe just to discuss a bit more on how you can kind of engineer the prompt to make sure that it's not gender, age bias.
Yes. So I think it's as simple as you add one more sentence saying whatever that you're worried about, include it there. That's what I normally do, and it's been working very well for me. So if I'm worried about ageism, I would say do not design or do not write the content that violates or suggests something based on their age. Or you can also more like positive side, like please emphasize more on people's experiences, or or qualifications than their age or their gender. So that's one thing that you could write. And so normally whatever that worries me, I tell the AI not to do that.
So you have to add that context. So by the way, that question opens up indeed another question, because if you are talking about organization-specific content, so you can control what kind of information you feed it, there might be hidden bias there as well. Would it be possible to sort of clean that up using AI? So get the bias out of your content and get like unbiased content using an AI engine, because it's really good at rewriting content. Could you do that?
So I actually tested this myself. So anybody can go to OpenAI and actually try this. So ask a lot of sensitive questions and then ask them, tell me 3 bias from your answer. And a lot of times what happens is it would ChatGPT or any AI tools will tell you, oh, there is no bias. And sometimes they also state I am an AI and I'm not responsible for this. So it's very interesting that how AI reacts to bias. And we need to understand, going back to our first point, human bias versus AI bias. AI bias is bias of human that's amplified. So we need to keep in mind that we as a human creator need to be more mindful when we're creating tools like this.
But isn't it also true that all of us are always biased because you have a certain background culturally, your education, your upbringing, your experiences, that makes you, by definition, biased? So I think what I learned is the only thing that you can do is be aware of that and make sure that you handle that in a proper way. So isn't that sort of the same with like content or biased answers from AI? It will be there and you just have to deal with it in a proper way?
That's how I feel about it. I personally, this is my personal opinion, I do think it's impossible to have a perfect AI with 0 bias. I think because it's a human creation, there always will be little bit of bias based on who created and what model they used. However, I think it can be mitigated, and it's important that we know it's there so that we can be conscious about it.
Correct.
And yes, I just read Andrea's comment. Probably needs to be more education around bias in general. Yes. So right now, one thing that I want to highlight to educators who's attending this workshop today is be aware and be mindful of this when in a teaching, I would say, teaching context. So, because future generation, so the younger generation, a lot of them are growing up with AI tools. They often don't filter their information. Because I'm the generation that grew up without AI, and now that I'm exposed to AI, I know I have my previous knowledge to compare to, and I can do more intensive analysis. But younger generation only has this AI knowledge side, and it gets a little bit more complicated when they are trying to determine if the information is valid or not. So something that we should be mindful of.
But it's interesting because it's also, if you look at what is out there content-wise, so you have AI that gives you answers, but also a lot of people will look at social media for answers. And if there's any much biased information around, it will be there. So, and we don't regulate that. So the question is, are we measuring with 2 standards there?
Sorry?
Are we measuring 2 different standards? So because we don't do anything on all the rubbish that's out there on social media, and we sort of scrutinize what's happening with AI.
It's an interesting topic for sure. Robert said this is a dangerous question to ask, but have you played with bias based on ethnicity? as a person of color, I am curious what the results might be. I actually haven't tested on ethnicity yet, but I did test around student context, like in terms of like the regional biases, like analysis of students in Asia versus Europe versus US, and how sometimes it's more harsh, the standard is more harsh on Asian students. So that's one thing that I noticed, but not particularly, but something I think I'm gonna try after this workshop.
There's also another direction of ethics that Chris is asking about. We spoke about it yesterday. So now we have more and more tools that where you can upload specific information, but also some of those tools actively scrape information from your company. And it can be either from emails, it can be from Slack or Teams conversations, things like that. So that opens up a whole different question. So what is mine and what is for my organization, and what kind of access do people have? Do you have any thoughts on that? We sort of parked that question for this session because it's an interesting discussion, but it's a bit of different angle of ethics.
It's one thing that I've been, for personally, what I've been trying to do is Google Bard started having a lot more comprehensive AI based on different documents, like everything combined. It could be Google Document, it could be Google Calendar, and then it's combining a lot of different things and giving you access to it. Here, the problem is going back to also going back to human error. So if somebody documents something that's wrong or misleading, this amplifies very fast. So let's say someone made a mistake of writing down meeting notes saying, oh, we agreed to meet next Wednesday, and it turned out it wasn't. Then it's just amplified. Anybody from the organization asking the question, it's tracing, the AI is tracing back to this particular source, which is wrong, and it could be amplified. So we need to, so I would say when you're training your own AI model for your organization, be aware that there is a room for human error.
Okay. But it's also, if I, in an email, probably write an opinion, so it's not a fact. And maybe I state an opinion that's just in an email to you, it's just for you and me, and not for other people to see. So how do you regard that?
So that's, this privacy becomes very interesting. So depending on where, which country you're in and which state you're in, usually email is not, so your one-on-one conversation with your colleague shouldn't be part of the public, shouldn't be exposed to public. And I'm a strong believer that this privacy should be protected. However, this might not always be the case based on which company and which policy your organization has. Because if there's a contract that all of these information is considered company asset, then it will be part of it can be part of the training AI model. So something that you should be. But I believe EU specifically, it is illegal to include that information, but I could be wrong.
Yeah, it depends. It depends on how you read the law. We have the GDPR law in Europe, but it's not that clear on these kind of topics because it's more focused on information that I can lead back to you than it is about if you have an opinion, if that opinion can be shared. So yeah, probably if I say that Hailey said this, then probably yes. If you put it a bit more, so yeah, so it's a bit of a question mark there, but it's an interesting one. Okay, any other questions to wrap up with from your side, Molly, or did we sort of cover most of them?
I think we covered most of the questions, yeah.
Okay. So, well, I think then that's it for this session. So, Hailey, thank you very much. Really great having you on. And well, I know we will meet in Dubai in a few weeks' time. I'm looking forward to that. So, and I'm really happy that you were willing to come on our event and share your knowledge and insights.
Thank you for having me today, guys. Thank you.
Thank you, Hailey.
Okay, goodbye. See you soon.
Perfect. Go ahead, Kasper.
Yeah, so I think that brings us to the last session, but I think first we want to talk about the book, Molly, correct?
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. So I want to use this place briefly to inform you that I, together with my colleague Vaidei Bamidi, wrote a book on employee-generated learning. So that is the idea behind Easy Generator, that subject matter experts, employees should create a lot of learning and performance support material. So in the book, we cover sort of the why, we go into the theory behind it, we have examples of companies using it and doing it. We sort of collected, we are now doing that over 10 years, so we collected a lot of that information. There's also a couple of chapters on how to implement it, but also how to deal with objections, for example. And the final chapter goes into the future, so what's happening next, and that touches a lot on AI and a lot of the topics that we have been talking about here. It goes indeed about things like a corporate brain, a database where you collect information and experience from your organization. So it's not printed yet. It is in production as we speak, but you can already pre-order it. It will be available early next year, and you can now pre-order it if you want with a discount. Okay, so that was like the infomercial probably. So now we go to the recap session with Chris.
Yeah, we'll bring Chris on stage here. Give her a moment to join.
Hi, Chris. Can you already hear us? Yes, there you are. You're on mute. On the bottom of your screen, there's a green button with a microphone. I have to click it. Yes, that works. Hi.
For some reason, there was something showing up here saying that you had invited me for something, and then I couldn't get rid of that to open my microphone. Can everybody hear me okay?
We can hear you fine, Chris.
All right.
Great. So yeah, so the final session that we want to do, because we had already had 6 different sessions with in total like 8 different speakers already. So a lot of information has passed in the past hours today and yesterday. So the idea of this session is that Chris and I will just or Molly will go over the recap of those sessions, and then we will sort of give us our 2 cents on it, what we think is most interesting, to sort of give you like an overview of the whole thing. And then at the end, we will sort of also try to bring that together and see, okay, what does it mean for the future? So we have on the session, we have Chris Wildermuth. We know each other already for quite some years now. So we never met in person, always online. So we did more sessions together. And I invited Chris because first, she's an amazing person with an amazing knowledge. But she brings together 2 interesting things. So first thing, she's a professor or now at Barry University, before it was Drake. And she's teaching things for corporate learning about e-learning, management training, whatever you do. So it's a really interesting mix what you bring to the table from an educational perspective, but also with great knowledge about corporate learning. So I think that in combination with everything happening around AI, and I know that has your interest as well, sort of made me ask you for this session, because I really like your opinion there. And I know that you will not... that you will be blunt in your opinion, you will not hold back. So I like that as well. So Chris, having said that, can you maybe introduce yourself a bit better?
Thank you, Kasper. Yes, so I'm originally from Rio de Janeiro, Brazil. I'm not sure if there's anybody here from Brazil. Came to the United States like 2,000 years ago. I don't think I'm going to say when, because that would date me. And I'm currently in Melbourne, Florida, and I am the director of the organizational leadership program for Barry University. And I love technology, absolutely love it. So when AI came on, I wouldn't say when AI started, because as we all know, AI has been on forever. But when AI came to everybody's living room I jumped into, especially to find out how I could use for education and how I could best help my students deal with it appropriately.
Thank you. Then, so Molly, you sort of you prepared an overview of the sessions with sort of the highlights of them, and then yeah, you can just shortly present that, and then we will respond to that.
Perfect. So yeah, of course, we'll start with the first session here with Shrivanti, which was around demystifying AI, navigating the myths and truths. So here we kind of gave a recap or a introduction to AI and the different types. So I'll read the first point, and then yeah, maybe I'll read all three, and then you guys can respond to them. So the first major point: the creativity of humans will still be needed amongst AI. AI is intelligence, is not unique, but based on predictions. The second, the data that comes from AI is not necessarily safe yet. More consent systems will be needed. And the attempt of AI is to mimic the millions of neurons of the human brain. So I'll leave that to you too.
Chris, do you want to respond first?
Yes, right. The first bullet is capturing my imagination. And I'm seeing this from two perspectives. The first is that because, and I'm relying on other sessions for that, because in AI everything is amplified, you do need the human person to go in there and say, all right, this is something we will use, this is something we will not use, which means it's, at least for now, AI is not correcting itself. But one thing that really captures my imagination with AI is that we may be able to use our creativity for things that we may be able to use more of our creativity, because maybe the mundane tasks, the easy tasks, even from a learning and development perspective, the stuff we would spend forever, like writing or worrying about the exact wording or structuring things right, that can be done automatically, and we can spend our creativity thinking on more ways to bring. I'm thinking of the second speaker who spoke right after the first session, to bring emotion, to bring experiences. So let's think about how to bring emotion and experiences and use our creativity for that, and let AI do its thing.
Yeah, I think I understand that completely. So what indeed stood out for me was the discussion we had about how AI works, and basically that Shrivanti explained to us that based on a lot of data and pattern recognition and all kind of smart stuff that we have in AI, the only thing that AI actually does is predict what is the next word, or if it's an image, what is the next pixel. And that's really dumb. On one hand, I knew that, but when she said it that way, I was sort of reminded on that, because if you use AI, if you use ChatGPT and the other tools, I'm very often so impressed by the answers, and sometimes not, but very often I am impressed by the information I get out of it, or sometimes even the insights I get out of it, because it connects things that I wasn't connecting myself. So you start to think of it as a really intelligent thing, while it's not. It proposes to be. So that is really interesting, because it's sort of like a monster in disguise from that perspective. And that is what I think came out for me from Shrivanti's session, is on one hand, the potential is huge, but on the other hand, you need to be aware that it is also not that smart. So you need to keep thinking by yourself. And the other thing that came out of that is that it is basically replicating what is found. So it's not really able to create new stuff. So I spoke to a marketeer the other day, and he said, yeah, this is the death of the marketing, because everybody is saying now AI will do that. But it means that every company that uses the same prompt will get the same marketing strategy and the same marketing slogan and the same things there. So that doesn't, so you need to distinct yourself. So that kind of needs creativity, innovation. That is something that is not there. And I'm wondering if it will be ever possible, because of how the technology works, that it does that. So that's sort of what, So on the one hand, I have sort of a reminder that, okay, AI is not that smart. On the other hand, sort of question. So, okay, what will the future bring with AI, and where are those boundaries? What can it do and what can't it do?
And I think perhaps we need to continue, because AI is going to become smarter, right? Like at this point, it's still rather dumb, but it was even dumber when we started using it just last year. So it's getting better, and it's getting better very fast. So there very likely will be a time in which some things that we consider creative that we can only do now, the machine is going to be able to do it. So is then how do we as humans continuously reinvent ourselves to do things that the machine cannot do? On the one hand, that can be terrifying, especially from a, oh my gosh, I'm going to lose my job perspective. On the other hand, it can be freeing because it's allowing humans to go where they didn't have time to go before. One thing that really stuck with me and concerned me with Spravanti's presentation was that part about it's not safe yet, and we need more consent systems. And what comes to me is, oh my gosh, just because we could go there, should we have gone there? Because if those consent systems and those protection systems are not there yet, I have very serious concerns about the ethics, and that's something that we can discuss as we talk about some other sessions.
Yeah, but I think that is like that's in the past, because the moment that you ask the question, shouldn't we have not go there? We're already there, and you know that you can never stop it. The same with gene manipulation, all that thing. The moment that technology is available, people will use it. So in my mind, the only thing you also know that bad things will come from it. So the only thing you can do is make sure that there are a lot of good things that are also coming for it, so it evens out.
Correct.
Okay, let's go to the next one, Molly.
Yeah, let's move on. So we'll talk about Nick. I will have to mention too, I'm noticing there was something wrong with my slide template. So the last word on the first line on every slide is repeated. So you just have to ignore that for me. But I will, I'll read them out. So this was from Nick. So first point, learning will not just take place because we created thousands of courses. We don't think, we feel. Therefore, learning requires emotion, which AI cannot replicate. And education is a weird self-serving ritual. That was a quote from Nick.
You want to kick off, Chris?
I definitely wrote down that quote as he was speaking. Education is a weird self-serving ritual. I heard that and I shook my head and I thought, oh, wow, okay, let's unpack that. And I wish Nick were here to unpack it with us. A ritual suggests to me, just the word ritual suggests that it's something that is done for symbolic and culture preservation reasons. A ritual is not really necessary. It is like we're sitting right now, or we're behaving in a certain way or speaking in a certain way for ritualistic reasons, not because it's the only way to do it. So when we say that education is a self-serving ritual, what we're basically saying is that we're doing a lot of things in education for culture preservation reasons. And those things are self-serving, which means that they could be there simply to sustain the machine that is education.
Correct. Yeah.
And that thought, I'm very curious, Kasper, what you think about that, because as an academic, as a professor, as somebody who's been in higher education for a long time and who's very passionate about it, I am also not blind to what we need to do to revolutionize what we have right now.
Yeah, so a great question, because I think indeed he is sort of challenging the education system. Also in the book that he wrote, he does that. And for a part, at least I agree with him, because of course there's a need for education, but it is the way that we educate in and how we educate. So my wife is a primary school teacher, and I sometimes have discussions with her because she teaches kids stuff that they're completely not interested in. So they're like, so by the way, she teaches 4 kids that are in the Netherlands, and they have to teach the language, to learn the language and stuff like that. So there's a variety like between 6 and 12-year-olds, but they have to learn so many things that I would ask, is there an internal need for that? Do they want to need it? Will they use that? So the whole program, but also the way that we do it. So one of the things that Nick said was that, like, basically presenting or just tutoring in that way, like a formal learning approach, is one of the least effective way of learning, because you need to experience, you need to have emotion. And if I think about schools and university, it's not a place where emotions and feelings come up like at the first thing. So at least I think he has a point that we should reconsider it. And I think for a part, it is true that it is a self-serving ritual, because it's something that sustains itself by creating the demand for that kind of learning. It's also the reason for it being there. So he has a point there, but I don't have the alternative. I don't know how you would organize it in a different way. How do you think about that?
I mean, I don't have the alternative either, right? Like, if I had, I don't know. I'd be a very special person that somehow has the answers. But I do think that it's a problem worth discussing, and discussing it not only in the higher education or primary education levels, but also in L&D, in corporate learning.
Of course, if you see an onboarding course, it's also not like it triggers my emotions and attention, and I will forget most of it within minutes. So it is an interesting discussion, but I think that one thing that he didn't touch on, but that I think is also important, next to the fact that learning is not connected to the way we think or the emotions we have. And with that, we know that if you learn something, so there are theories that you learn better if it's connected to music or a certain event. And that is because it taps into your emotions. So at least he has a point there. But I think if I look at schooling, so education, formal education, schools and universities, I think the biggest thing that we did is we made a complete disconnect between the learning environment and the society. And the same thing is happening with corporate learning. So you have like the formal learning from L&D in your academies and everything, and then you have the work you have to do in your workplace. And that is changing now in the corporate world. So we are talking about learning in the flow of work. We're talking about performance support. So we are seeing that learning in corporate is moving towards the workplace. So maybe learning in education should also move more to the workplace of that, and which is society. So I think that the wall we built between society and learning, if we can break that down or at least get some openings in there, I think that would be a great benefit.
My imagination is being captured by that too. I think one last thing that I wanted to say about this is that everything I've heard these last 2 days suggests to me that at least as of now, AI is not going to be truly revolutionary, because it's basically very efficiently organizing what humans have been thinking. And humans are biased and tied to their cultures and tied to our ways of doing things. So if we think about from an L&D perspective, if we're used to that old-fashioned course with the little modules in which each module we teach something, well, when we ask AI to do it, AI is going to do the same thing, and then we are going to think that is great. So that's where I think we need to spend some time. Okay, just because AI can create it, that doesn't mean it's truly revolutionary. And to Nick's point, that doesn't really mean people are learning.
No, so I think it was he who said there's already a lot of mediocre content out there. Do not use AI to create more. It could have been something else. I think yes, along those lines. But I think it's really interesting because indeed, what you said in the beginning, that might be the power of AI. If you look at all this, because AI can take away a lot of the tasks that you now spend a lot of time on that are not crucial, that do not make the biggest difference. So like indeed writing for part, or organizing or analyzing or whatever. So it would free up your mind to focus on the more important things that have more impact. And if you look at it in that way, it's no different than automation, or when we start using personal computers or got access to the internet or things like that. And I'm old enough to have I've gone through all these stages. So when I grew up, there was no internet, there were no computers. I'm 61. So I actually learned that while it was out there. But maybe AI is from that sense no different than that. And every time that something like that happens, it's like you get like stories how great it is and how dangerous it is, and probably there's a bit of truth in both. But I think that it's really interesting to sort of see that maybe it's something that actually will help you do your job in a way better way, and maybe in less time, and you can focus on other stuff that is way more important. So that could be the conclusion. I'm not sure. We will see in a couple of years. Okay, so anything else on this point, or can we move to the next one, Chris?
Well, there's just one thing also and that is not specific to Nick. It's just a question that came up in Nick's presentation, and then it's being kind of a theme. As you know, one of the things that I teach and that I'm fascinated about is precisely ethics, right? And there was some discussion about using people's personal emails and Slack conversations. Like we were just through that in Hailey's excellent presentation just now. Just because it's legal and because it's allowed and because it can be done doesn't necessarily mean we should do it. So perhaps we as L&D professionals or educators or pretty much anybody listening here, perhaps we ought to really spend some quality time taking a look at our moral reasoning and how we make some decisions and what threats there are to moral reasoning, because otherwise we may fall into the trap of, yay, this can be done now, let's do it, this would be great, and we might be ignoring some ethical ramifications of the decisions we're making, which will now be amplified, as other speakers have said.
Yeah, that's a great point. So it's not the law who creates the boundaries. It should be you, with your moral.
Yeah.
That's an interesting one. Yeah, I agree with that. Yeah.
Perfect.
Okay.
We can move on. So this was our fireside chat. What does AI mean for your learning ecosystem? So Kasper, actually, the point you mentioned about the amount of mediocre content, Nelson actually mentioned that, but one of the points on here. So there's a huge amount of mediocre content out there. Don't add more with AI. AI will be able to use employees' performance data to direct them towards the right behavior change. And AI can be used to enhance social contact.
You want to tackle that first, Kasper?
Yeah, so this for me a bit different because I was in that session myself as speaker. But I really think that something that I never hear, and that I sort of, when I started working with my colleague Fide on the book, but also on the roadmap for Easy Generator in the future, we looked at AI in a way to actually connect people, because you can analyze things, you can go through data, which is much too cumbersome to do it for a person, but AI is really good at doing stuff like that. So I do think that, and I don't hear a lot of that, but I think that indeed creating social fiber, social context, social networks with AI, and actually elevating collaboration into things like more like communities of practice and stuff like that, I think there's a great opportunity there. So, and I don't hear a lot about that, but that's one of the things that we did discuss in that session that I really liked, and that is really on top of my mind, because I think it's one of the biggest benefits potentially of AI.
Yes, as I was fascinated in this particular session when we ran the poll, and a lot of people were interested in the social aspects of AI. Yes. I'm reminded of, I don't know, an ATD, Association for Talent Development in the US conference that I attended like 2 zillion years ago. And I remember how fascinated I was that they would pick my profile and then connect that profile to the profiles of a bunch of people who were attending. And then there was this map that they would have little pins and put me close to other people who, and that was already AI, by the way. And that was, I don't know, at least 20 years ago. So it's just something to keep in mind here. I think the opportunities to bring people together, both inside organizations for networking, for mentoring, for support, using AI and putting together those profiles can be huge. But of course, we go back to the issue of consent, because we don't want to invade people's privacy. We do want them to consent to that. And we have to be very careful in organizations not to confuse, I'm not sure if this is going to come out right, but real consent and consent under perceived coercion. Because just including something in our employee manuals or employee contracts and having employees sign it doesn't mean you have real consent. It could simply mean people felt coerced to sign it. So that's yet another thing to keep in mind as we think about, yay, this would be great. Now we can get everybody's personal information and connect it in this wonderful system so that the employees can get in touch with each other. What privacy might we be invading? And for that, as to a lot of other things, I'm thinking from a design thinking perspective, let's pilot. Let's try it with a real group of true volunteers. Those are not people who had to sign some employee manual. Let's see how these things work. And perhaps that would apply to AI in various applications.
Yeah. Okay. Good point. Yeah, shall we now go to the next one, Molly?
Yeah, sounds good to me. So yeah, the next session, which was our last session of yesterday, was around mastering prompt creation in ChatGPT, how to yield the most effective results. So 3 key points from there. Talk to AI like you would an actual person. It can be similar to a conversation when you chat with AI. Provide content and be specific when creating prompts, and provide feedback and examples when looking for a better response.
Do you want to go, Chris?
Yes, I'm going to connect the first bullet, talk to AI like you would to an actual person. As you know, Kasper, but people watching don't necessarily know, is I'm writing a book. I'm finishing writing a book. I actually finished writing a book, and I'm just in the final editing phases, which I would love AI to do for me, by the way. And it's called Against All Odds, Leadership and the Handmaid's Tale, in which I'm connecting the characters of the Handmaid's Tale series, TV series specifically, to leadership concepts. One thing that I did a lot throughout my writing process was have long, convoluted conversations with ChatGPT. Not because I wanted ChatGPT to give me the answer. As you can imagine, if I had ChatGPT write my book, it would be a career ender. So I was very careful not to do that. Also, ChatGPT was hallucinating like crazy as we were having conversations. But because that allowed me to have a constant companion during the day with whom I could have a conversation. It would not be reasonable or logical for me to have a colleague doing that. I would need to have a coach with me 24/7. ChatGPT was that coach 24/7 with me, who could answer my questions, and then I would say, oh no, ChatGPT, you're wrong. What you said is not really true. This character does not really exemplify that. And then there would be these answers that would basically help me think.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that my conclusion here would be a bit similar. I love the practicality of this and the tips that we had. And I have to say that I only discovered prompt engineering like a couple of months ago. And it actually, when I at first I was just asking questions to ChatGPT and Bart. When I discovered that if you add context and structure, you get way better response. So that was something I learned over the last year somewhere. I don't know where, but I learned that. So what I recently more learned, and it was also something that was in this conversation, is that those prompts are connected together. And I discovered that. So I made a typo in a question. So I put in the question and it gave me a wrong response because of my typo. So then I copied and pasted back and corrected the typo. And I said, oh, sorry, I didn't know that you meant that. So it was actually connecting the previous question to the next question. And it does that pretty well. And that's also what Kartik touched upon yesterday, is that you can sort of follow up on the question. So you can see it not just as a singular question, but you can actually see it as a conversation. And the question is just the start of that conversation, but go further, ask questions, try to dig in a bit deeper like you would do as a person, and you will get a better response in the end. And also the interesting thing is if you ask the same questions the same time a couple of times, you will not get the same answer over and over again. So that's also, it will differ a bit. So that's really interesting. So if you go to more into like, instead of a question mode, into a conversation mode, it will give you really interesting responses there. So that was, I think, the key takeaway for me here.
Yes, I would agree with that, and I would say that's pretty much what I've been doing. I never worried, even from the beginning, I never worried too much about knowing exactly how to do prompts, but I was treating my interaction with the artificial intelligence as a chat, as really a conversation, and then I was getting pretty interesting results that way. One thing I'm curious about, Kasper, and I'm thinking about Abby right away. She came, Abby, right? Yes. And she was showing the AI capabilities within Easy Generator, which of course I was fascinated about. And what I'm wondering is and that's not just Easy Generator, that's for L&D in general. What can we do inside those tools to minimize the chances that people will reproduce mediocrity? Because the easier it gets to produce, the more likely people are to do it.
Correct.
I'm almost thinking of there's a tool within Easy Generator that allows you to create good learning objectives, for example. So what is it that can be there in the structure that will guide people gently to use AI appropriately?
Yeah, great question. One of the things we actually are working on. So it will be twofold, I think. So one, right now, if you saw the session with Abby, it is just like an open field where you type in your question. So it's just one thing. So I think that the structure should start there. So Karthik showed us like there are like an 8-point approach to get a better prompt. But there are also a simplified version of that. That's like you have like 4 things, like context and a couple of things. So just by asking people, not just ask a question, but ask a question and be specific on these 4 points, like creating like a small form, you already get a better prompt. And the second thing is really closely connected to what we said with that conversation, that we are also thinking that like we have a tool that will help you build better learning objectives, we also need a tool that will help you build better prompts. And it will be like a conversation. So instead of sending that question directly to ChatGPT or whatever engine we will use, we want to build an engine that sort of makes sure that your prompt is complete by asking you questions. So can you elaborate a bit on this, and how do you mean that, and can you be a bit more specific on that? And once your prompt is like really good, and we can mix that, by the way, with best practices and stuff like that, and improving it even, then we send out a prompt to the AI and to get your information, and that will give you much better results. So I think that on one hand, better AI results is by feeding it better data, and that will be more specific data, company-specific data. On the other hand, helping people create better prompts is the other thing that will have a big impact.
Love that. Looking forward to seeing it.
Yeah, not yet tomorrow, I'm afraid. So we're just in the concept stages. Yes. Okay, Molly, let's go to the next one. So today.
Moving today. So why AI video is a secret weapon for L&D teams. So I think this will not be new for most of the people here, but some points that Steffen made. So one, in 5 years, you'll be able to create Hollywood-grade videos. Always should think about the original meaning of content, even if it has been altered or created with AI. And you shouldn't try to fool people with AI-generated content. It's really important to be transparent.
Are you already using stuff like this, Chris? Or
no, I was totally fascinated by this tool, and as you can imagine, knowing me, I'm going to go there to explore it pretty much very soon. One thing that when I when I heard also the idea that in 5 years we'll be able to create Hollywood-grade videos, on the one hand, that is a little scary because, of course, people could use it nefariously. On the other, think of I can't say this word in English, democratization of it all, in which people who would normally not be able to produce something will be able to produce something. My daughter and I, my daughter has introduced to us the wonders of really, really bad high school productions that somehow found their way in Amazon and in Amazon Prime, and they're horrendous, and they're very good precisely because they're horrendous and funny. One of the things that I was talking to my daughter about is, on the one hand, there are some quality controls that are not there, and everybody is able to produce these things. On the other hand, just the fact that voices we wouldn't normally hear, we will be able to hear, is just so inspiring to me.
Yeah. Yeah, I have to say that I still, on one hand, I'm very impressed. But this was also one of the comments I saw in the chat. So that hearing a voice of somebody telling you something, explaining you something, do you need the image with that? Especially when it's not a realistic image. So I can also record it myself. So I think it makes it easier. So, and I think especially the translation feature is really powerful. But for this, I'm also a bit wondering, for example, I like the simplicity of it now because you just have a text that you upload and then. But this is the same when you had the early scenario tools. They were really simple as well. So they were not very rich in the output, but they were really simple. I'm afraid that if you want to create like Hollywood-grade videos where multiple people will be interacting in a video that you can create based from text, that becomes so complex in creating a script like that. So it can actually convert it into video, but it will be almost impossible for a normal person to write a proper script and get a proper video. So that's sort of where my concern is. So I think it is pretty powerful as it is now. I'm not certain if it develops further, if that will add value. Maybe the simplicity is the power. So that is sort of what I got from that session, but I really don't know. I love what they do now. I think it's an amazing tool, but I'm really interested to see. And actually, I have to use it myself. If they go beyond and go into more like full characters and maybe later on characters that can interact, if I still like it as much, I'm not sure.
And I'm pretty optimistic that they will, or somebody will. In other words, that is coming. One application, and I think one participant asked that question, like, are we going to be able to create scenarios in which people interact with the user, which of course can be a very effective way of teaching. And there was something that was done in my previous university, had some kind of a grant in which they had the system in which the students could interact with real people. They were actually actors that showed up as avatars on screen. It was very effective. The students learned it. It brought emotion into the process. So a lot of the things that we know work, but it was ridiculously expensive. So maybe that kind of tool, if it gets better and if it gets easier, could solve the problem of cost, just thus democratizing the opportunities for people to learn.
Yeah, no, correct. Yeah. So I think it, yeah, and I really love it because it's already out there for like 2 or 3 years on a pretty high level. So for me, it was one of the very first implementation of AI that I thought that was, oh, wait a minute, that is something that I can use and understand. So I think that they are one of the companies that are pretty much, they were ahead of their time and they're now sort of on top of their on the market. So it's really interesting what will happen there next, but it's quite impressive what they achieved over the past few years. Okay, let's go to the last session, Molly.
Yeah, the last session. So this was on ethical implications of AI and L&D. So some of the 3 key points. AI can improve fairness because it does not get emotional. In AI, mistakes can be amplified, including bias, and prompt engineering can help to mitigate bias.
I think the mistakes can be amplified is the theme of what we've been talking about. So the good can be amplified, the bad can also be amplified. And then in the L&D community, maybe just like I said, it's time for us to take a very good look at our ethical training and ethical development. it's probably also a good time for us to review our sensitivity, our understanding and awareness of our own biases, because no human being is going to be free from them. In fact, Kasper, I think you said something to the sort. It's like if we're human, we're biased, right? So the other thing that occurs to me is that if you want humans in the L&D community to be able to screen for biases, I guess, or minimize those biases, we need to think of teams of people and diverse teams of people. Because no matter how much sensitivity training you go through, you're not going to get away from your biases. What you need is a group of people with different biases so that we can help each other with it.
Yeah. Yeah, so I'm still sort of processing the session because I was in it myself. But I think that what is really interesting was sort of, it sort of came to my mind while I was in the session asking questions to her, that it is not only the data that is creating the bias, it is also the prompt, but it is also the AI software, because it is learning from the data. And so you should write clean, unbiased code, feed it from day one with completely unbiased content, and then ask completely unbiased questions to get a result, because there are three elements. And I never realized that all three have to be completely clean from bias in order to get an unbiased answer. So it's almost undoable.
I would say it's entirely undoable.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, but it's a really interesting one, because on one hand, if it touches on ethical things, so some of the bias is really horrible and it's damaging. But other things, like we had a bit of that discussion as well. If you want to make a distinction between people, it is not discrimination. It's a distinction, and you want to do that sometimes in learning to serve them better. So, and you need to make certain assumptions around your audience, because you don't teach one-on-one, you teach in groups, which by definition makes it that you sort of create a general image of that group to teach them. So, and with that, you will have some biases in there. So that is something which is really interesting. So it sort of triggers a lot of questions, also questions that go beyond basically AI and bias, but just bias and learning in general, which is of course also an interesting topic.
I think taking all this into full circle, Kasper, because we started talking about that. You said we can't stop it, right? It's there. The cat is out the bag. We're building the ethical components of this airplane as we fly it. So to me, the question is, what do we, everybody watching this, everybody interacting with us today, what is our ethical responsibility to impact this, even if in a small way? Because we do have that responsibility, even if we're not the people who are the CEOs of ChatGPT or whoever is there now.
I think one of the things that Hailey also said, it is your personal responsibility. So you just need to be aware of it. And the moment that you are aware of it, you can actually act on it. So I think different than your personal bias, which you have, and you just have to be aware of it so it doesn't hurt anybody and you steer it in the right direction. So that is, it's an interesting one. Okay, so those were all the sessions. So Chris, if you sort of look back at that and then turn around and look forward. So what do you think? So what will all this bring us?
Oh my gosh. So from a human creativity standpoint, I'm very excited about the possibilities this brings. I'm excited about all the space that I now have to do things that before I would be, I don't know, before I might, as a professor, be spending forever creating a simple quiz. Now I can, hey, ChatGPT, not ChatGPT, but AI does that. And then there's even this little block that I can put on Easy Generator automatically. So now I don't have to worry about that stuff. So I'm excited about the time that is freed for the human brain to do more creative things. I'm scared that we are moving too fast and that consent issues, privacy issues, all sorts of ethical issues haven't been sufficiently discussed. And that can be amplified in a very bad way.
Correct. Yeah. Yeah, and how do you see the impact of AI and learning and education? Do you already have ideas on that, or is it like an open?
Yeah, so at first, when ChatGPT just came out and we started coming to grips with it, professors all over the place were terrified. In fact, many still are, because, oh my gosh, this is going to be cheating city. The students are just going to go to ChatGPT and put my entire essay on it, which, by the way, it has happened, and it still happens, and it happens quite a bit. What I have found with my students is that the more time I spend helping them understand how to use these tools to enhance their creativity, as in having conversations with the tool, as in using it to organize their own thoughts, then they're amplifying their creativity rather than, putting it in a drawer and ignoring it. The good news is that there are parts of this that are truly freeing. For example, a student who before might really struggle in academia because maybe that student doesn't have the background to write very well. All of a sudden, writing very well doesn't become too important anymore, which of course is probably terrifying a lot of my English professor friends, or whatever language. But the reality is, if a machine can organize my thoughts into writing them very well, is that a bad thing? We could argue that it's as bad as the calculator helping me add things up, or the GPS taking me places. Correct. It's a tool, and maybe we need to concentrate on different things.
But it's interesting because if you draw the line, so if I look at my own experience, so my handwriting is more than horrible. I have difficulty reading it back myself. So so we have a rule at Easy Generator, basically. If you give me paper, it doesn't count. So I need everything in a computer. But when I was like 25, so around that age, I was teaching unemployed people to teach accountants to bookkeeping on a computer, and we used material that was so horrible. So I started writing more and more my own material. And then a publisher asked me, "Can you create like a series of textbooks on that?" So I said, "Yeah, but how are you doing that? You have to write it, and then we have editors who are actually." I said, "Well, the only way for me to say yes is if you give me a computer, because I didn't have a personal computer, but I need a computer. Otherwise, I can't do that." So I actually got my first IBM IT then with like a 10 megabit hard disk. It was like incredible. What do you do with all that space? I remember that. But that was like such a moment that technology enabled me to do something I wasn't able to do before that. And the same is with my English. So I'm not a native speaker. And although I have improved a bit over time, if I write, my writing is far from perfect. So I use Grammarly and other tools to improve my writing, for the grammar, for the sentence, for the construction of the sentences. And in fact, maybe AI is just that. It's another tool that will help you improve your productivity, do it better, and do it faster. So,
and as long as we're using it to boost our creativity, there's absolutely nothing wrong with that from an education perspective. It's great. It's just not making sure, but also encouraging students to think about all that extra time in which you can really think something amazing. Now, how are you going to use it? How are you going to use that time? And I don't care if you can build the perfect paragraph and you know where to put the commas, because, hey, Grammarly does that. It's fine. Anything that Grammarly can do, I don't care if you can do or not, because, hey, there's a machine for that. That's absolutely fine.
But maybe for education and for corporate learning probably goes the same. It will take away, because if ChatGPT can just give the answer, so is it worthwhile learning? So the answer
and that's
maybe it's not. So maybe, and it's something that I think we need to look at where the value in learning is. And I just had it. Well, you wrote a book yourself, but you wrote it by yourself, I think, correct?
Yes.
I had the privilege to write it together with someone, so with Vaidehi. And we are very different persons. So she has like a huge theoretical knowledge. I'm much more a practical guy, and she's from India. I'm from the Netherlands. So she's like this big, I'm that big. So we couldn't be more different. But we are a great team, and we actually created something together that neither of us could have done by him or herself. But the interesting thing was that both of us learned so much while writing it, because the collaboration, having the discussions, or challenging each other on each text, or are you certain on this and that, and how do you come to that conclusion, being really specific. So I think that we made like not one, but maybe 3, 4, or 5 steps in the level of our thinking on employee generated learning. And it's something we completely didn't anticipate. We just thought we write down the experience of the last 10 years and that's it. And it turned out to be something completely different. So the fact that we were collaborating and putting our thoughts together on paper or in the computer, that by itself was a learning experience, was like awesome. And I think that maybe we need to look at that. So it is not that much in the words that you write, but it is in the process you go through. And I think maybe we should focus more on that with learning and education than just on the facts and the numbers and the data.
Yes, I completely agree with you. And by the way, I noticed that as soon as I noticed students using AI or ChatGPT specifically to answer things, by the way, they were using other things before. They were using so-called tutoring sites. Like cheating was not invented with the age of AI. But what I noticed is that once I changed the assignments into, now let's talk about your experiences, your life, what's happening to you, what's happening in your organization, I stopped having problems with ChatGPT magically. So perhaps the issue is what we're asking people to do, not whether, because if we ask people to do something stupid and meaningless and they're busy, guess what they're going to do? Try to cut corners.
Correct. Yeah. So and maybe it's a nice example, but I used it before. But I actually have hearing aids because I damage my ears by listening to too loud music. And I recently got a new pair, and it's Bluetooth enabled. And if my phone goes, I can just click on the left one, and I can answer the call because it also has a microphone. But I programmed the right button to ChatGPT. And it actually means that if I activate that, and for example, if I play a pub quiz and I read the question out, ChatGPT will give me the answer in my ear. So I can now win everything. The only problem is that it will give me the answer and it will keep on talking. So I can't keep without talking to it, but it's really interesting because it brings knowledge that close, and it sort of changes the way that you look at knowledge. So what do you need to actually be successful in your life? And it's something we know. So knowledge is not that important. So skills are way more important. And it's something we know in education, something we know in L&D. But at the same time, it's so much easier just to push facts, to push information. So, and it's something that I talk to a lot of learning managers. And recently I started adding a question that I ask all of them. So if you critically look at the content that you create in your company, so what kind of percentage is like fact-based, is knowledge-based, is knowledge-driven, and which part is like skills-based? And all of them, by far, the majority is maybe 90% or more, it is still really factual knowledge, knowledge-based, and not skills-based. And we know that we need to change that, but it's harder to do. So the easy way out is not to do it. And I think that AI can actually push it in that direction because it becomes less and less useful to push that information because it is there and it will be there more and more and more. So we need to go beyond that, and we need to go, how do you use that knowledge? How do you apply that knowledge? And how do you get better at your job by improving your skills? So I think it will be a push for the better, but it will be hard because it's not that easy to do that. So I think that is one of the things that I look at AI that could be the most beneficial thing, that we actually improve learning. But as I said, so where I see in corporate learning some windows opening towards the workplace, that is what I still don't see happening in education. And I think it's really, really necessary, because at Easy Generator, we are now like with 200 people or something like that. And most of those people who start, they are fresh from university. We have a lot of young starters. And the thing is, they are really smart and they know a lot, but they can't do anything. You have to basically teach them everything, because they are not trained or work to work actually in the real world in a company like Easy Generator. So they lack all those skills. So that is what you have to do. And they are super smart and have super much knowledge, but those skills, a lot of the skills you need to be successful in a company like us, they lack. So you need to train them from the bottom. So that's really interesting, because I think you need more of a mix there.
And what you said earlier, we need more of a conversation between education and the industry. Why is it that all those young people are coming to you without the skills that they need to succeed in an organization?
Yeah, correct.
One note that I have in here is this: we are being given a precious gift, which is time. What are we going to do with it? Are we simply going to like fire a whole bunch of people and then make them equally busy? Or are we going to actually, as L&D professionals, who was such an important piece of organizations, we do such important work, whether we do it in organizations or in universities, what will we do with our extra time? I think that's the question that will define whether we're going in a really cool direction for humanity or just a dangerous one.
Yeah, I think that's a great note to end this session with. Thank you for that. Yeah, and so maybe as like a closing word, so I was really privileged to be part of this. So I think we were close to like 6 hours of conversations like this, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. So I think it was a great topic. I enjoyed the speakers. I want to thank you, Molly, because you are the one who sort of driven this and has put it all together and made sure that it was like, well, almost a perfect, flawless experience. I think maybe went one or two tiny hiccups, but I think nobody noticed or hardly noticed. No, I really loved the whole process. Thank you all for attending. So we have hundreds and hundreds of people over the 2 days that attended sessions. Some of you actually from start to finish, which is really impressive. So you are one of them, Chris. But I enjoyed this a lot, and I think that if you compare that, so this is the second time we did the event. So last time we was much more simple, but we actually upped our game, and I really like that. So we will think about what we can do to even make it more interesting for everybody next year, and I really liked it. So, but thank you, Molly, thank you, Chris, and thanks to all the presenters and people who were there. I enjoyed myself thoroughly over the past 2 days.
Yeah.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much, and thanks everyone for joining. And yeah, I hope to see everyone again next year. And thank you, Kasper, for all your time and hard work in hosting the event.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Bye, everyone.